Story 1. About a third of people with epilepsy do not respond to medications. There is this thing called sudden unexplained death in epilepsy, where a person goes to sleep and just dies. Story 2. There is a recording of the last Kauai bird singing before it went extinct. It was a mating call sung by a male bird. The song has breaks for the female bird to respond. There is no response because the male Kauai is the last of its kind. Story 3. There were over 55 million people worldwide living with dementia in 2020. This number will almost double every 20 years, reaching 78 million in 2030 and 139 million in 2050. Much of the increase will be in developing countries. Already 60% of people with dementia live in low and middle-income countries, but by 2050 this will rise to 71%. It also does not have an effective treatment. Story 4. Florida's coral reef tract, the third largest in the world, has experienced a 99.5% coral cover loss since 1970, 30% of which occurred since 2008. I have witnessed fields of coral, once covered with fish, reduced to lifeless fields of rubble. Story 5. The man who directed the rape of Nanjing, the brutal murders and tortures of hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians, Prince Yasuhiko Asaka, never saw justice. He grew old playing golf and died of natural causes at 93. Story 6. The disappearance of Geraldine Largay haunts me. She was hiking on the Appalachian Trail and became lost when she left the trail to relieve herself. While lost, she used her survival skills to survive for nearly a month, but eventually succumbed to starvation and exposure. When her body was found 2 years after her death, there was a note there, reading, "When you find my body, please call my husband George and my daughter Carrie. It will be the greatest kindness for them to know that I am dead and where you found me, no matter how many years from now." During the time she was lost, she tried multiple times to call for help using her phone, but there was no signal. She saw multiple search planes and helicopters, but they could not see her through the thick trees. She tried to set fires to nearby trees to let them know she was there, but couldn't manage it. Towards the end of her life, she thought about trying to climb up onto a hill above the canopy, but by then she was just too weak from starvation to do so. She died in her sleeping bag after 26 days of holding on for as long as she could, hoping help would come, but it never did. We know all of this because she wrote it down in a journal she had with her. And before she died, she wrote a note to her husband saying, "George, please read, Saxo." On it, perhaps the most gut-wrenching fact of all is that Geraldine was found only about 2 miles off the trail, heartbreakingly close to salvation the entire time. Story 7. We abandoned the pigeons. We spent centuries domesticating them, being friendly to them, and as a result, they moved to our cities and relied on us. Then we decided they were pests. Story 8. Ex-wedding photographer here. A lot of people are wildly disappointed with their wedding day, so much so that they lash out at wedding vendors. One of the main reasons people quit working in the wedding industry is due to ongoing abuse from their clients. You can do one tiny thing less than perfect, and they can turn on you. I've even seen 2 different photographers move cities entirely just to escape past clients. In the industry, we call it the wedding hangover, and it usually hits 2 weeks after. Story 9. I think someone said this in another thread the other day, but it stayed with me. You don't recognize your last. The last time you ever hung out with your school friends. The last time you spoke to your grandfather. The last time you hugged your pet. The point is, we never know when we are in a moment that this could be the last time we ever do this. Unless we are going through some kind of life change, we just don't realize this moment is special. And because of that, we most likely won't remember it. Story 10. As people age, they often experience loss of friends, family members, and social connections. In many cases, elderly individuals may find themselves living alone, with limited mobility, and facing health challenges that further isolate them from the outside world. Studies have shown that chronic loneliness among the elderly can have serious negative effects on physical and mental health, leading to depression, anxiety, and even increased mortality rates. Despite their wealth of life experience, wisdom, and often a desire for companionship, many older adults struggle with profound feelings of loneliness. which can go unnoticed by society at large. Story 11. If you watch footage of the September 11th aftermath, you'll hear a ringing sound in the background. It's not actually ringing. It's a chirping device on first responders that were buried in the debris. Usually, the device doesn't make a constant noise, but there were so many people buried that it created an unbroken wail coming from under the rubble. Also, in the weeks and months following September 11th, there were a lot of cars covered in dust on the streets surrounding what used to be the Twin Towers. These were victims of the attack who were never able to return. Story 12. When I was 12 years old, I unchained my dog from the yard where my abusive parents kept him locked up. I walked him into a nearby vacant lot and let him go because I thought at least one of us should be able to get out. I never saw my dog again. Story 13. Enslavement ended gradually in the state of New York from 1799 to 1848, freeing enslaved families one generation at a time over 3 generations. Parents were freed while their children remained enslaved for up to 28 years. I cannot imagine being one of those parents. Story 14. The talented young voice actress behind Ducky from The Land Before Time and Anne-Marie from All Dogs Go to Heaven was killed by her father at age 10. Ducky's memorable "yep, yep, yep" quote has made me sad to think of ever since learning this. Story 15. It took my dog a couple of years to realize he was here to stay. I was his 7th owner. I am his last. He was returned to the shelter multiple times for behavioral issues, and when he acted out, he would immediately get depressed, thinking he was going back. Very good dog, very happy now, and has turned into quite an entitled princess. Story 16. Your loved one didn't say any last words. For context, I worked in a nursing home. People always ask, did they say anything? And the truth is, no. We obviously don't say that to the family, but death is not like in the movies. A weird thing that happens sometimes is that 24 hours before death, they get a sudden spike of energy. This may look like they're getting better, so it confuses the family members sometimes. Also, 80% die alone. Working with elderly people broke me a little bit. Story 17. Pangolins are believed to be the most illegally trafficked animals in the world. Their scales are sold on the black market for Asian traditional medicine. Story 18. Scientists think that only something like 0.1% of all species that ever existed happen to be lucky enough to find themselves in the perfect conditions to fossilize for us to find. The vast majority of creatures lived out their whole existence and either evolved into a new form or died out without leaving any trace for us to find whatsoever. Without a time machine, we can never know they existed, and if you could go back in time far enough, the majority of what we saw would be to some extent more or less a mystery. Additionally, we're not only talking about ancient animals, squishy things that don't fossilize, or tiny microorganisms, but relatively recent megafauna too. For instance, within our DNA, we have found evidence of a ghost population of a mystery species of our hominin cousins with whom we, Homo sapiens, interbred. We have no other tangible fossil evidence for them. They weren't Neanderthals or Denisovans. We have no idea who these people were and wouldn't even have any idea they existed at all if we relied on the fossil record alone. They were an entire species of people that we lived with and knew intimately, just up and gone without a physical trace. What other creatures might have been that we cannot begin to imagine. Story 19. Japanese occupation of Indonesia in World War II. I almost never see Indonesia mentioned, but they had the 5th highest death toll during the war. Approximately 4 million people were killed, 99% of them civilians. Millions more were tortured, raped, and enslaved. Allies largely avoided the islands in the Pacific campaign, so it was mostly just sickening brutality for its own sake. Story 20. 90% of nursing homes are absolutely horrific. I am an emergency medical technician and have been in and out of many of these facilities. A few are high-quality, clean places with staff that really cares. The vast majority reek of human feces, have employees who do not care about the residents at all, and serve them barely edible mush for food. The worst one I ever saw neglected to put a patient on their prescribed oxygen. It nearly killed them. Actually might have never found out how that turned out, but when I left them at the hospital they were circling the drain. Story 21. On the Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 that was destroyed by a missile, only some of the people on board died immediately on impact. Some of them would have survived for a few minutes, hopefully losing consciousness due to the air pressure, but we don't know for certain how long that would have taken. This weighs on my mind because I have no idea where my coworker and friend was sitting in relation to where the missile hit. I just know it took days for her to be found. Story 22. When a man hangs himself, he will often get a death boner. When their loved ones find their body, this will be one of their last memories of their loved one, alongside desperate scratches on the neck and on nearby walls. Don't do it. Story 23. The symptoms of a heart attack, such as squeezing or tight chest pain that radiates to the left arm, are typically seen in men. Women may not experience these warning signs or may just feel a sharp pain. Story 24. The American home has more clutter than anywhere on Earth. United States children, representing just 3% of the global population, account for 40% of the world's toy purchases. Some estimate the number of items in the average home to range between 60,000 and 300,000 distinct items. Home clutter and possession of excessive items contribute negatively to mental health. I spend most of my time at home and started looking into all this out of curiosity. Wound up severely emptying my home and only keeping items I actively use. It was a lot to give away or toss, but it did indeed make a great impact mentally and practically. The ease of cleaning and organizing and the emptiness itself are pleasing. Plus, my remaining possessions have real value and stand out. Story 25. About 100 billion humans have ever lived. Of those 100 billion, only about 100,000 people are considered significant enough to be remembered after death. For the vast majority of people, you will be completely forgotten within 50 to 100 years. Along with all the joys and sorrows of your life, your thoughts and dreams, your hopes and worries. All of it completely forgotten as if it never existed in the first place. Story 26. Grave of the Fireflies, the movie? Yeah, if you've seen it, you know how it ends. If you haven't, here's a spoiler. Essentially, it's the story of a young boy and his little sister in the aftermath of World War II in Japan. In the movie, the young boy dies after his little sister dies, both from malnutrition and being ignored by everyone around them. The actual story is much more heartbreaking. The original author, who had an incredible amount of guilt, actually survived by hiding food from his sister and hoarding it for himself. He wrote the book that became the movie out of that guilt, and he felt that she may have survived if he hadn't hoarded the food. Even if she didn't, he felt he should have died as well. Story 27. One of the major killers in either World War I or World War II, I can't remember which, was barbed wire, not guns or men, just barbed wire because men would get caught in it and die or get cut up, which would lead to lethal infections. Story 28. Autistic people live, on average, 54 years. 58 years if they don't have developmental delay, 39 years if they do, and 54 years on average. They are something like 9 times as likely to commit suicide as non-autistic people, but they also die from accidents, lack of access to care due to lack of connectedness or poverty, lack of someone to notice they aren't well, lack of people to help with anything at all. Story 29. The Olympics serve as an excuse for massive amounts of government corruption. Ever notice how every Olympic stadium is built new rather than using existing structures? Ever notice how they always go over budget, often by double or sometimes even triple? Ever notice how they all seem to be famously low quality despite this? And yet, every year, the contract to build this facility at enormous taxpayer expense is hotly contested. It's because an Olympic facility is a perfect opportunity for civil servants to do or repay favors for local businesses and their associates. You want to get in good with the deputy mayor? His brother owns a paving company, and you're in charge of getting the Olympic Village paved, so why not give him a call? We're going to need a lot of rebar, so why not ask the owner of that steel foundry you're trying to buy a car from what he'd charge, and pointedly decline to see if that offer is market competitive? Story 30. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is experiencing a massive problem with sexual violence, and it is not being widely discussed. The situation is worsening, particularly with the increase in sexual assaults involving children. Story 31. Untreated attention deficit hyperactivity disorder can reduce lifespan by 13 years. The impact may be larger than any other single health threat, including weight, nutrition, exercise, sleep duration, smoking, alcohol use, and risky driving. Story 32. The chances of survival if you go into cardiac arrest outside of a hospital are incredibly low. I think it's something like 20%, but maybe even lower, even if someone is performing trained cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Television and movies have given us the idea that you can just do a few chest compressions and the person wakes up. That very rarely happens. Usually, you're just doing it long enough until a medical professional can come and take over, and even then, they might not be able to do anything if they can't get a shockable rhythm going. Story 33. Once you have diabetes, you will never be normally healthy again. You need to manage your diet forever if you want to be in a relatively healthy condition. Story 34. The search and rescue dogs who worked after September 11th got depressed that they weren't finding anyone alive and stopped working. But recovering bodies and body parts was still important. Workers had to hide in the rubble for the dogs to find, so that they wouldn't get too depressed. In case you thought search and rescue dogs just worked for the treats, they know.